That's be great.
Okay. Gerard Ahern, Chairman.
Present.
Brian Holmes.
Present.
Andy Kischtitz.
Present.
Bradley Reed.
Present.
And Kay Stoner.
Present.
Okay, perfect. So I'll start with the reading of the public hearing notice, and then we'll go right into the items for tonight. So in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 11, notice is hereby given that the Wetlands Zoning Board of Appeals will hold a continuation of a public hearing via remote participation on Tuesday, July 21st, 2020 at 6 p.m. to hear and act upon the application of the Woods at Farm Road LLC and Deschennes and Farrell PC. The applicant seeks a comprehensive permit for a proposed housing development entitled the Woods at Farm Road to be located in Bolton's residential zoning district at the corner of Farm and Berlin Roads, identified on Assessors Map 3C as parcel 72, approximately 2.47 acres. The proposed development consists of 4 single-family detached home ownership units. 3 of the units will be sold at market rate, and 1 of the units will be sold at affordable to those who earn 80% or less of the area median income to be counted on the town of Bolton's affordable housing inventory in accordance with General Law, Chapter 40B. Tonight, our hearing items will include the remote participation guidelines overview. We'll talk about our site walk recap that was scheduled for last night. We'll look at the applicant's formal response to Horsley Whitton Group's second peer review letter. We'll have a discussion of outstanding department comments. We were presented with some updated waiver lists, so we'll review those, and we'll also schedule time for the public comment, as we did receive at least one letter from one of the butters representing in his comments of a myriad of items and representing that he's speaking on behalf of some of the butters. So that's the plan for tonight. And so why don't we kick off, Eric, just any highlight housekeeping for the remote participation?
Sure. So just a reminder that this is a public hearing. So we follow a very similar format as if we were in person. So there will be a period, like Gerard said, for public comment. Just a couple of reminders. All participants entering the meeting by computer should rename themselves with their first and last name. All participants, excluding board members, will be muted throughout the meeting unless called upon by the chairman. All participants are required to state their name and address when called upon by the chairman. Participants called upon more than once should restate their name. When the chairman opens the hearing for public comment, participants can raise hand or type their comment in the chat feature. Attendees participating by phone can dial *6 to mute, unmute, and dial *9 to raise hand.
Okay, perfect. So we'll start with an overview of the site walk. So last night, Seth Donahoe, and I believe was Bob Case there as well. Bob Pace.
He was.
With some of the face masks, it was hard to tell, but so the applicant through Seth had a site walk for the board that was conducted via Zoom for some of those of us that could not be present. So Seth Donahoe performed the actual walk through the property, showing off staked areas for the various homes. He showed the areas that have the 2 structures that are targeted to be removed, the root cellar and the sugar shack. He went over some of the trees areas with regard to sugar maples and near the wires or the overhead power lines. We did an overview of where there's a drainage area that potentially could be repaired on the right off the road, and then again showed various parts of the property where the septic would be and where the ponding area, catch basin, and whatnot. So it was a productive half hour, and appreciate that Seth was able to accommodate us on that. There were some board members at the present on site. There are a couple that were from Zoom. So if anyone who was on site has any observations, certainly feel free to chime in. And if Seth, you want to just give an overview, if you thought there was anything outstanding or anything that cropped up last night, any questions, certainly feel free to add your comments.
Well, one of the biggest changes that have come about since our last meeting is that we prepared a separate sheet that specified the removal of the 2 existing structures, and those are south of Unit 1. So I hope the phone did it justice, but when we walk over to that area, it's easy to access. You can back a vehicle right up to the larger structure that we've been calling the Sugar Shack. And then the area below the structure is relatively absent of mature trees. There's a photo on sheet 7 that shows that downslope area. So what we've proposed is to protect all those existing trees and then improve the buffer zone in that area, because that is our closest alteration to the wetlands on this site. So the project will result in that area having increased vegetation and more native vegetation in it, as well as increasing the offset between the buildings and the wetlands.
I believe you mentioned last night that those trees were going to be marked.
Yeah, so there is we field located all of those trees. There's a table, so there's documentation of them existing now. And typically before we would start this project, we would do that again before any construction activity occurs, so that we could document that the tree is in good health. And then when the project's completed, we can also hopefully document that it's in good health. And if not, prescribe a replacement that would add benefit to that area as well.
Right. Okay.
So for those that didn't have the benefit of being on the sidewalk, I'd be happy to address any particular questions, but we do have a pretty organized schedule of how these activities are to occur on the site. And real briefly, we've identified the access route. And like I said, you can drive a vehicle right up to the larger structure right now. That access route will be used to remove the first structure. And then from within the footprint of the first structure, the smaller structure would be removed. So everything would operate on the uphill side. We do not need to have equipment go closer to the wetlands.
That's good.
And there was also talk of that abandoned utility pole being removed.
Yep, there is the remnants of a power service down there. That's correct. Erica has the cursor right over it. And that the removal that's prescribed as well. It would be dropped in smaller pieces so that ideally it could be hand carried to the working zone. So again, we're not asking to have any type of equipment operate that close to the wetland. The pieces would be dropped, it would be carried to a bucket or carried to a loading area that's been prescribed outside the 100-foot buffer zone.
So Seth, on the, while it looks, you say, very green, that property, you talked about the soils last hearing with regard to drainage and things like that. But in one of the abutter comments that we did receive a letter on, there's a host of concerns that they'll bring up, or I'm sure that letter either got to you or will get to you, the applicant. It just came in today, I believe. But there was question about potential harm or noise or issues concerned with any potential blasting on that site. Is there any do you envision any need to be blasting any type of material?
At this site, blasting is not anticipated.
Yeah, I did, right, given the types of soil, I mean, I haven't heard of anything about ledge or any big, items like that, but, again, I want to be sensitive to if it's a concern of the abutters, we might as well, if we can tick them off to say, well, yeah, there are concerns that probably won't be one of them, but if there were to be that, just know that we'd have to, raise, how does that get done so it's appropriately notified, and what are the precautions so that abutters feel safe.
Well, the construction of the units would follow the same process that any other building permit for a residential dwelling in Bolton would have to follow. And I believe the town's building permit, it requires certain construction hours, and the applicant's not asking for an exception to that. So this would have to operate the same as any other building that's being constructed in town.
Oh, yeah, right. And as we get into those, as we get closer down the road of these vetting out the technical aspects of the project, then you get into the procedural or logistics part of it, as you're aware of, and many of the people on the call are. But as we have new abutters because of the location and unfamiliar process, those types of things, hours up, that whole scheduling takes place. It's just it isn't part of this early process, but it is something that we will certainly cover. Any other board observations?
I guess
Erica,
not.
did you have any? Oh.
I was going to say, this is Brian, not just from an observation standpoint. I thought it was good to be able to actually stand on the site and see the footprints of the four houses, understand how they planned on taking down the sugar shack and root cellar. It made a big difference actually being there on site and to understand kind of the scale of the development and the scale of the houses.
Yeah. I do. I also was one of the things that was pointed out. Again, I was remote, but it was nice to have the Zoom. At least Erica was able to coordinate so we could see it. Was the amount of space that won't be touched. The way that the fields in the distance, you can see that while there'll certainly be a footprint of development should it get approved. There is, precautions on protecting open space. And so it is good to see that visual. So have some comfort that it's not going to disturb a big part of that parcel.
Yeah, and also on one thing I didn't realize before I was there is behind the houses, and I guess if you're looking at them to the left of the houses, there are two spots of land that is not owned by the developer. So there's land there that's not even part of their parcel.
Right. Yeah, I think there was reference to maybe conservation last night, or
there's the part on the right side there right there where the cursor is at, and then on the back, there seems to be like some conservation trust land there.
Erica, did you have any open notes from last night that things for follow-up that we just want to recap on?
I think in terms of follow-up, we probably want to discuss the stop sign that the police chief recommended for Farm Road. We did briefly touch upon, you had mentioned it, the existing drainage structure along Berlin Road that's collapsed, and whether or not, that could be a condition in the permit. And I have some follow-up information on that. And speaking with our town administrator, because I wanted to get a better understanding of that process since it is in the road right of way. So if that is something that the board seeks the applicant to replace, that would require approval also from Board of Selectmen at one of their meetings. And then the other thing that I think we briefly touched upon at the site visit was whether or not the applicant would propose sugar maples along the frontage
Right.
of
Mhm.
the intersection here, given the overhead wire that goes across here. And I do have some follow-up information on that as well.
Right, right. So we can, I know there was, I think it came in today, some comments from Mark Case.
That's
but
correct.
So, when we go into the, sort of, into the board comments, that you received, we'll address that, but yeah, those were some of the key items that were spoken about last night.
And honestly, Gerard, the only other thing I can think of is, you know, we did take some time to view unit 3, I think, because this particular unit seeks the greatest
Closest.
favor to the front for the front
Mhm.
yard setback. I believe it's only 41 feet where 50 feet is required. So we did, we were able to really sort of stand here in the road and understand where those stakes were and
Right.
visualize
Yeah, and I believe the
that.
other one
So
was
that was
approximately
helpful.
47, right? I think
Right.
the other one was approximately 47 feet, so they both had materially some size and frontage, just again, not within the current zoning, but, you know, but that's why it's on your list for a waiver section, but at least visually, yeah, you can see it was nice to have it marked so that you get a good perception of where those would be.
Gerard, do you mind if I ask Seth the question?
No, go ahead.
Seth, I hadn't had a chance to really look at the site plan before the meeting tonight, and now that I'm looking at it, this is the updated plan that was submitted, I think either the end of last week or early this week. Did the driveway off of Berlin Road, did that get extended? Or is that
Oh.
exactly the same as it was?
The driveways have been the same all through this
Okay.
process.
I'm not sure why it looks longer to me tonight.
Mhm.
But okay.
Okay.
And were you able to add the spot grades?
Yes, so those are shown with the symbol X and then the numeric value after them. So those are throughout the plan. And I believe Horsley and Whitton's comment related to just making sure that the intent of the drainage structures could be met and that we're going to be pitching the pavement in that direction. And so those are on that sheet now.
Yeah, I see them now that I've zoomed in. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm. Perfect.
And truthfully, that's the only change on that plan sheet, that and the note to refer to sheet C7 for the removal of the buildings. So the very minor updates to it.
Mhm.
Okay. All right, so why don't, if there's no other comments regarding the sidewalk, why don't we go on to the next topic that deals with the letters that were provided by the applicant to respond to the peer review, Horsley and Whitton's peer review.
Seth, you want to give just a quick overview of that, our formal response to Horsley Whitton's second peer review? I think Erica's actually kind of already touched a couple of the things, but let's just let the board know what we did.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So there were a couple comments that were either partially addressed or left outstanding from our last peer review letter. And so we've gone through those one by one on our letter to the board. The first one is that we had committed to preparing a plan for the removal of the existing structures. As we talked about that earlier in this meeting, that plan is in your package now. And unless the board feels a need to go through that again, I'll just skip over that. It's there now. The other thing is that there was a concern about the status of the pond on the site that we've been calling the farm pond. So we sent a letter to the Conservation Commission requesting confirmation that the farm pond was indeed discussed as part of our ANRAD process, which was the approval of the wetlands on the site, and confirmation that it was determined that it does not meet the criteria of a vernal pool. And we received a response from the Conservation Administrator indicating that our ORAD, which is the resulting approval, did indeed indicate that as well. Final thing, we just spoke about it, was the lack of the spot grades in the plan. We had a erroneous drafting setting that prevented them from printing on the prior plan sheet. So we've corrected that, and we just looked at those on that sheet as well. And Horsley and Whitton asked, as part of the development of the site, there are some invasive plants on the site. So we've prepared a package that identifies how to identify those and then how to treat for them. And that would be an ongoing process at this site. It's anticipated that that would be throughout construction and possibly beyond, that people would need to maintain that.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, that's the those were the outstanding comments. So if you need any details on any of those specifics, just let me know.
I think well, I think maybe it's the next attachment document. Erica can show the different species that were identified. I think there were 3 of them that you had highlighted particularly, and what are some of the criteria for? I think it's the invasives right there, Erica. Yeah. So, you know, so there's a formal letter. We talked about the management of that, and so there's the Rosa multiflora. There was the Rhamnus capitica, and I think there was a honeysuckle of some sort. So bush honeysuckle. So there's some good details there. So thanks for providing that. I'm gonna start digging it out of my yard too. Any questions from the board on the mitigation plans or anything that's provided that Seth just talked about?
Gerard, do you mind if I ask just a couple of quick comments
Nope, go ahead.
or questions, comments? Seth, for the invasive species management, is that throughout the site or a targeted specific area?
The area identified, the peer reviewer, was the northwestern corner, which that would correlate to about where we parked on the sidewalk, or closest to the intersection of Farm Road and Berlin Road. But as this site was a field, and most of it has been maintained as a field, it is very likely that these species will be some of the first to pop up. That's just their nature. They germinate faster and they grow faster. So the site as a whole will need to be monitored throughout construction to make sure that they're not pioneering in any other portion of the site.
Okay, that's helpful. And then as far as the plan goes that you submitted for the removal of the structures, I assume that'll be the same plan that you submit as part of your notice of intent?
Yes, we will intend to use the same plan set if possible.
Mr. Chairman, if the board doesn't have any further questions regarding Horsley Whitton's peer review, we are, I guess we'd be asking the board. It appears that we have addressed all of their concerns. Seth had indicated that they may or may not respond to his last letter, given that essentially what he did was answer, provide them the 2 pieces of information they wanted. I don't know if the board is expecting Horsley Whitton to verify that or not, but at this point, we believe we're complete in dealing with the Horsley Whitton review.
Okay, so Erica, to that point then, could you reach out to Horsley Whitton and just have them confirm that there's no outstanding item that with regard to any technical review matter?
Yep, I actually have done that already. I forwarded the documents when I received them from Seth. I spoke to Janet, and they will likely be providing a final, report based on those documents review.
All right, that should. be buttoned
Gerard,
down. Yep, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, one other outstanding item, or actually two more outstanding items relating to the design of the project that we didn't completely finish talking about was the sugar maples.
Mhm. Right.
We're ready to talk about those, Erica. They were the next agenda item.
Oh, I'm
Right.
sorry. I'm
Yeah,
completely
right.
jumping ahead. I apologize.
Yeah.
No
Designers,
worries.
design departments.
We're ready when you are.
Just making sure you weren't asleep over there, Doug. So that's good, because we, so Eric, could you bring up the agenda?
Yes.
Just a quick one so I can, right, so we have the, we talked about the spot grades. That was the item, they drew the X's and it sort of fell out because of the drafting or mapping issue. But, and then the plan to remove the structures, that was good. The sidewalk recap, and then, right, we'll do the department comments, which will take into consideration Joe Pesnoa's follow-up comments for us that he documented, and as well as the design review board dealing with the facade, but then we'll deal with the maples and the stop sign. So good. So why don't we start with Joe Pesnoa's analysis. We did, based on Andy Kitch's comments about the stone facade on the market rate homes, but not the affordable, then they would definitely be distinguishable versus they're supposed to be indistinguishable, at least by Department of Housing guidelines. It's not necessarily statute, but it is the guidelines, is my interpretation of my understanding. So we reached out to our technical resource, Joe Pesnoa, and he gave us some guidance on that. So Joe, would you mind going over that?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
And for the record, Joe Pesnoa, MHP consultant to the board. Yes, there is Department of Housing and Community Development guidance that the affordable units should be indistinguishable from the market rate units when viewed from the exterior, and that's the the important part of that. The kind of the nuance and practice that we've seen from other boards also goes to the way that the market rate units are marketed and what is included as extras and what is included in the base price. And there was a comment from the applicant last time with regards to possibly allowing the stone faces to be offered by the for the market rate units, and that if one were to be, if a market rate unit took that option, they would do that unit, they would do the affordable unit if the affordable unit so chose. And the key point there is the affordable buyers generally are not allowed to purchase any extras because they're the difference between the pricing on the affordable units and their maximum allowable income on an annual basis. There's only a small window there, and many of the affordable buyers have trouble securing financing because of that narrow window. So they really aren't allowed to go buying granite countertops and all these other extras because that's just going to drive them beyond the ability to afford that set price. Again, the price is set by the state. So there's that quantity. But if the applicant was willing to give that affordable unit owner the stone facade, and again, if another buyer had purchased that extra, then would be okay. That because you'd have two units with stone facades, and the affordable wouldn't be distinguishable. The issue would come is if a market rate buyer bought the stone facade and the affordable unit, or in the affordable unit owner didn't. Now, is there a difference? But the applicant had proposed to limit that only two units in total would have that, and it'd never be an instance in which the three markets would get stone facades and the affordable just didn't want it. So all of a sudden it's now different than the others. So I think within the applicant's proposal last time, there's a workable condition that could probably work, get this done. The other option for the board is to condition that no stone facades be offered. And that is the recommendation of that was the recommendation of the design review board. The practice in town is for projects to go through design review board. So there's that is consistent with what happens. We're not treating this project any differently. And I don't think that imposition of that condition would necessarily render the project uneconomic. The project rises and falls on whether or not, either the market that is opened up by offering the stone or the extra money that's paid for the stone facades. If the project's rising and falling on that, then there's other things that are at play. It is obviously the discretion of the board as to whether or not you want to impose such a condition and follow the recommendations of the design review board.
Chairman, could I respond to that?
Certainly.
First of all, I want to point out that we did go to the design review board. We did institute, I believe, all but two of their recommended changes. One being the stone facade, and the other, the two that we did not wholeheartedly agree to. One, the stone facade, and secondly, the enlargement of the bathroom windows. But other than that, we applied every recommendation of the design review board, which I think is more than reasonable. As Mr. Pesnoa stated, we are required that the affordable unit not be distinguishable from the market rate units from the exterior. And what we've proposed to do is offer the stone facade to up to two buyers of market rate units. Therefore, we can assure that there will never be more than two with facades. You'll have two with and two without. Clearly, that meets the law of being indistinguishable because no one's going to be able to tell which are which. Obviously, a 3-in-1, that's a different story. We're not proposing that. We want to offer it to two, and maybe the two don't take it. Maybe none of the two take it. We could end up with one, in which case, again, the affordable would be indistinguishable. But we would ask the board to provide us a little bit of flexibility on this to allow it to offer up to two, and if two take it, then we shut it off there, and then we'll have 2 and 2, and there'll be no question about distinguishability.
Mr. Chairman, I think there's a workable condition there if the board is so inclined to entertain.
Okay. So Andy Kitch, who's one of our board members, was the person that brought it up, and it was a great observation by Andy. So I'd like to, if Andy has any comments about Joe's analysis of the applicant's response, certainly love to hear from Andy.
We circle back first and respond to a comment that someone just made about the original reason that the design review board opted to or recommend no stone facades. Someone asked that Joseph comment on that.
I can actually speak to that,
Okay.
Andy, since I was part of that meeting process. The design review board recommended it because stone facade is not a feature that you see on New England cottages. They viewed these units as New England cottages, and that's not reminiscent of that architectural style. And that is the reason why they did not recommend it.
I would also comment that I don't see stone facades generally in the area either. So to have a stone facade might be out of character with the existing structures in the neighborhood.
Yeah, and it looks like we have conflicting comments from the public. Some like it, some do not. I guess my only concern, and I guess this question would be directed to Doug, is what if there was only one buyer that opted for the stone facade? My concern would be that then there would be this asymmetry with the with the project from the road. You'd have one stone facade and three without. I think that might look a little funny.
Agree.
As far as from our perspective, we need to meet the law in making sure that this affordable unit is not distinguishable. And I think, as Joe has pointed out, we could clearly do that. As far as, I mean, my feeling is this whole issue of stone facade, I mean, we're drilling down on an architectural component that is such a detail, and that I quite frankly, I've never seen a zoning board, designing these units. To say that there's no stone facade in any of the homes in your town, I can't. I respectfully disagree with that. I disagree with that, and it's a personal taste. Some people like them. Erica, you don't. Andy, you don't. I do. Buyers do. I mean, I know it's within the purview of the board to make a decision on this, but I mean, we're really getting into personal likes and dislikes. And, by offering it to two and having one or two accept it, we've met the law of the affordable not being indistinguishable. I personally don't know if you want 4 buildings that are exact duplicates of each other. In fact, the design review board has imposed a requirement that we don't paint them all the same color and that we have different colors. They want them all different. So now if one has stone, that's making it different, but is that not an acceptable difference? I think we're getting into personal preferences here and away from what the law dictates.
If buyers agree. Oh, I don't know.
Gerard, do you mind if I just make one additional? I believe that was Bob.
It was. Okay, I didn't know if I could talk. Okay, I mean, why don't we let the market decide rather than the board? Okay, we don't know if anybody's.
The only thing on that I'd say is that we have to, as long as, at some point in time when we get through all the comments and, the different documentation that we're doing, and we're at that further down the road point, if we're looking at a decision or we're looking at waivers or we're looking at conditions, that as long as we feel comfortable as a board that we're meeting holding the guidelines that are in front of us for affordable housing and for like this one aspect, the indistinguishable. So we'll take the guidance of Joe Piznola under advisement. He believes there's a workable condition, and my thought is that we'll start there. We're not trying to micro-design the project. We're just trying to make sure that we're upholding our job as a zoning board to look at the nuances and the regs and guidelines that are within the process.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's a very reasonable approach.
Okay.
I guess I'd move on to the next couple of issues here. I'll do them in order of ease, quite frankly. We have previously agreed to the stop sign at Farm Road when we met on site. Seth, was that with the fire department or police department, I believe, or?
It was actually both were in attendance, and that was early on when Mass Housing came out.
Right, and we were also asked at that time to look at straightening out the curve in the road at that end. And we did. The problem is that the town right-of-way is not sufficient to allow for a straightening of that curve, and it would require a taking of private property from the property owner on that curve in order to do that. And that was deemed to be, difficult at best. And, quite frankly, we have no idea whether that would be possible. But because the town does not control sufficient right of way, we cannot straighten the road out, but we will do the stop sign. We have previously agreed to put the sugar maples in along the roadway, as opposed to what we had previously proposed. But then the question came up, is there enough room? Will they fit? Will they interfere with wires? And I know we have received a memorandum. And Erica, I'm sorry if you could remind me who sent that. I'm looking through here. I know I have it, but there we go.
It's on the screen. Yep.
Yep, thank you. Mr. Case confirmed that there was sufficient space. He did recommend a shift in a couple of them to make sure that everything would be in the right place, but and we're happy to accept the recommendations of Mr. Case in putting those trees in and committing to putting those trees in.
I think that's great. I think but the response from the tree warden was just missing some detail. I think it asked for 3 of them to be shifted, but there was no mention of how far. So as long as you can work with the tree warden to figure out the specifics, I'm fine with that.
Sure. In fact, we will. What I'm sure Seth could do is just tweak the location of those trees and just run them by Mr. Case again to make sure that the shift was acceptable.
Okay.
But the bottom line is we're committed to putting in the trees in the locations that are required by Mr. Case. And so, Green Mountain Sugar Maples, I don't have any reason to believe those aren't fine, because as he recommended. So stop sign, Sugar Maples, stone facade. We have committed previously to fix that drainage structure that was found to be deficient in the roadway. However, I would ask the board if they are going to, or should they make that a condition, that they condition it on the Board of Selectmen providing us the necessary approvals to do it, because I would not want to run afoul of the Board of Selectmen's position and then be in violation of our permit. So again, we're accepting of a condition that requires us to fix that, but please give us some language that says, provided the Board of Selectmen grants the permit to do it, because we do need that permit because it is in the town road. So again, committing to do it as long as the Board of Selectmen allows.
So Eric, to that point, could you reach out to the Board of Selectmen and give them an overview of that particular structure, the drainage structure that needs repair, and see if they would have any concern with folding that into their comprehensive permit?
So at this point, what I've done is I've reached out to our town administrator, Don Lowe, about it. And
Okay.
he recommended it. He thought it was a good idea, but he just also, he made the comment that it does require approval from Board of Selectmen. But I believe at this point, if it were conditioned in the comprehensive permit, it would be like more of an administrative approval. And that would need to be conducted through a public hearing, or not a public hearing, but just at a meeting so that they can deliberate on it. But if the board finds it helpful, I can at least send them an email to let them know, hey, the ZBA is looking to potentially condition this, something like that.
Yeah, because at some point we need their input. They've been have had input on other 40B projects. So to the extent that this is an item that is ultimately going to require their approval,
Sure.
If the indication was, oh no, we don't want to get on that road, then I don't want to, go down that road unnecessarily.
Mr. Chairman, and certainly would defer to Mr. Pesnola on this, but it would be my opinion that Should the board get verification from the selectmen that having someone pay for that repair in the public road is a good thing. I believe this board has the authority within the comprehensive permit to grant the permit to do that work. The Board of Selectmen permit is a local permit, and as you know, the comprehensive permit can subsume all local permits. So if the Board of Selectmen would be kind enough to send that letter to this board saying they would support that, then you could make it not only a condition of this permit, but you could grant us permission to do the work within the comprehensive permit.
Chairman, if I might,
Yep, sure, Bill.
I think this all can work, and I think the
Mhm.
devil's in the details within the condition that's formulated. We need to be a little bit careful because this is work that's off the property, which the applicant does not control. The Board of Selectmen controls the roadway and the right-of-way. And just like the stop sign or the realignment of Farm Road, you cannot condition the applicant to do something that he does not control. So should the Board of Selectmen say, well, that's our road and you're not going to do any work, or the contractor runs into an issue with regards to insurance and bonding and all of the other things that go into doing work within the public domain, then you don't want to have that adversely affect the validity of the comprehensive permit. So I think there's a way to do it. I think there's an offer from the applicant to do the work, and I think we can formulate a condition that makes sure that nothing happens. I would say talking about the realignment of Farm Road, just a quick look at the plan, and the plan does not show the right of way on the opposite side. So I think just to have the record complete, if Seth could submit something, a sketch or something that confirms that they've surveyed the right of way over there and that there is not an opportunity to straighten that roadway, then at least the record will be complete. That being a safety issue that is not being implemented at the recommendation of the police chief.
Seth, if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong. What was the source of the information that the town right away was not sufficient in that location to straighten out the road? Was that a result of us surveying over there, or was that information we received from the DPW folks?
We did the survey and we relied on the plans of record, which clearly show the shape of the property. And at the time, we had an informal conversation with DPW, and as soon as we gave him the answer, he was instantly in agreement. But we're more than happy to take Mr. Pesnola's recommendation, and we'll add the opposite side of the right of way based on that survey to the plan.
All right, great. I just wanted to make sure we had that information as opposed to have to going out and resurvey everything. Great. So we will do that, Mr. Pesnola.
Perfect.
The chairman.
Good recommendation, Joe. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I believe, at least according to the agenda and my notes, those were the outstanding department comments.
I believe that is the case. Erica, were there any other items that came in from boards?
I'm not at this point, no.
But some things come in contemporaneous with the meeting, so I think those were the ones that would have been covered so far, right? So,
Chairman, I can move on to the next agenda item if you'd like.
That's what I was gonna say, bring up the agenda, and then I think the next agenda item was, you did provide a list of updated waivers based on the most current plans that have been drawn, correct?
Yep, let me go over those because they're very short and I think quite simple. The first change was under our requested, our list of requests from waivers from the wetlands bylaw. In our original request, we requested exceptions from the Bolton Wetlands bylaw, section 233-2. But as we all know, or as I should have remembered, that in addition to the bylaw, the Conservation Commission also has regulations that dictate some of those setbacks. So to make this request correct, I included and the associated regulations in my reference to the wetland bylaws. So the waivers we're requesting haven't changed. It's just that we're requesting them from the bylaw and any regulations that apply. So Mr. Donohue was kind enough to point out to me that we weren't comprehensive enough in that statement, so we corrected it. I've added an additional waiver request from that wetland bylaw and regulations to allow for the removal of the sugar shack and the cellar within the 25-foot buffer zone, and also to allow for us to do the buffer zone enhancement plantings that we're providing. So that work, as we know, is within the 25-foot buffer zone, and it's work that we all agree must be done, should be done. We've agreed to do it, and so we need to make sure that we have the waiver from that wetland bylaw to allow that work to be done. So I've added that as a new waiver.
Can I comment on that? Is there something in there that also defines removing of the utility pole and that other concrete structure?
Well, it talks about removal of existing structures. So Seth, is that statement comprehensive enough? Did that includes removal of all structures, correct?
Yes, your statement references the sheet that specifically calls out the removal of that pole as well. So
Okay.
that
Right, so it says as depicted, the waiver says as depicted on sheet 7. And as Seth has pointed out, sheet 7 describes the removal of the pole in addition to the buildings.
Fine, I just wanted to verify.
No, cool, no, it's a good, great question. Under the dimensional regulations, I'll remind the board, we are only asking for one dimensional waiver. However, I had originally asked for the wrong waiver. I had requested a side yard setback waiver, which in fact is non-applicable. However, as was mentioned earlier, the current plan shows the front yard setback for units 3 and 4 at 41 feet. Your bylaw requires 50. And this is in the, if the board determines that under the Bolton zoning bylaw, we have 2 front yards, one off of Beach Road. Technically, we would meet the 50-foot setback off of the one road, but we wouldn't meet it off of, we would meet it off of one road. We don't meet it on the other where we're only 41 feet. So I've added that as our sole dimensional waiver, which is we want 9 feet of relief. So instead of being 50 feet back, we're at 41 feet back. And I do appreciate that at least the members that were able to make the site meeting were able to get a physical view of what that setback waiver means. I would submit that 9 feet off of a 50-foot setback is really, it's not going to be an outstanding view such that people are going to feel the house is too close to the street. 41 feet is still a significant setback. So that is our sole dimensional request. And those are the only changes to the waiver list that have resulted from, the Horsley Whitton review, the board's review. So we are very confident and prepared to discuss those waivers at the board's request.
So, and then, so you're going with the lowest setback there, the 41, because was it talked about at the sidewalk that the unit 4 was, what, 47 feet with the frontage?
we've dimensioned all units off of that setback. We could certainly specify a separate waiver for unit 4, but the bottom line is both unit 3 and 4 would need the same waiver. The severity of them obviously varies a little bit. If you need that clarification, I'm happy to make that.
Okay. No, it was more of a comment from me, just that I thought last night there was some comment where one unit was even further away, but still within the 50 feet. It was like 47 feet. So it was, the way it was written here, I just want to be sure I heard right last night, or this is the correct information tonight.
Gerard, I think it would be helpful if they did clarify, just for record's sake, so that we know the exact waiver that they're seeking for each of the units.
Okay.
Well, Seth, it's 41 feet for both units, is it not?
No, because of the alignment of the right of way, the numbers change slightly. They both need relief. The number needs to be adjusted if it's supposed to be specific per unit.
Okay, so one of them will be 41 feet, the other one will be farther back?
Correct.
So the 41 feet represents the largest waiver necessary. All right.
Correct.
Do you know the other number for the other unit, Seth?
I can get it to you within a minute if it's needed tonight.
No, I'll just submit it in writing tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Now I have for clarity and just so there's no questions down the road.
So, Mr. Chairman, that is the the modifications that were made to the waivers. We will provide the exact setback for each of units 3 and 4. Again, we do know that the 41 feet represents the biggest waiver of 9 feet. The other one will be less than that. So,
Doug, if I may,
sure.
It's 42.9 feet is the closest point for unit 4.
Okay, we'll clarify that in writing.
And all dimensions are depicted on sheet C 2.0.
Chairman, we're prepared at this point to address any other questions or comments the board might have. Otherwise, we hope to start discussing waivers at the board's convenience.
I think, I'm fine with what's been presented. I would speak for the rest of the board members if they have any questions or comments. But I did see crop up at least once a question or a comment from the butters that are on the line about some of the comments that we talked about. So I don't want to jump onto something without taking some public comment if necessary.
Oh, that, Mr. Chairman, that wasn't what I was suggesting. I do understand you need to go through the rest of your agenda. I just meant as to the waivers, we feel we're in a position to start going through them when you're ready. But I do understand you need to go through the rest of the agenda and certainly give the abutters opportunity to speak.
No, I thought you were, Mr. Chair, I thought you were saying, okay, let's skip on to now addressing the waivers. And I was thinking that was gonna, set us down the rabbit hole that we don't want to do at the moment. I want to take some of our comments to some of the observations.
Understood. Sorry for the confusion.
No, that's good. But I agree. Yeah, it's nice that we have them carved out. It's compared to other 40Bs we've done, it's not voluminous pages of waivers. So it will be it's a good starting framework. Thank you. So Erica, did you have, I saw a couple comments pop up, but I don't see them on my screen. So are you tracking those?
Yes, I'm happy to read them out loud if you'd like.
Sure.
So the first comment, The first comment we received was from Tom Kashuba. And he states, though not vernal, it is a permanent downstream feed of the Lover's Leap and Old Bay Conservation Watershed, hence the culvert that feeds the pool and wetlands. Is there a conflict of interest, re Ducharme, doing any research for the town meant to add that was a species to target? I'm not sure if Tom would like to, if the board needs further clarification from Tom on that comment or question.
Yeah, why don't we just unmute him and ask him, just be sure we understand the question.
Okay, Tom here. Can you hear me? Tom Kashuba?
Hi, Tom. Yes, we
Oh.
can. At least I can.
Okay. Yeah, I was just basically saying that there was this talk of the vernal pool, not vernal pool, and so forth. More importantly than a vernal pool, although a vernal pool is unique and needs to be preserved, it is also a full-time pool because if you follow the watershed back, it goes all the way up to Old Bay, and that's a very large protected area, which wraps around all the abutters on my hill. And so that's a very important piece. And that in turn, that little pool is just sort of a catch basin, which in turn feeds the wetland. So I just wanted to make sure that its import was still understood, even though it's quote, not a vernal pool, which of course is only seasonal. That was my only point there. And
Okay.
and I also, my comment about the charm, I appreciate your presence and the work you do, but I just thought it might be a conflict of interest if they're involved in determining what is, what was my comment? I'm just reading it back. I got so many here. I was worried that there might be a conflict of interest if they determine anything on behalf of the board or for the board. They can provide as input, which is always appreciated. Of course, that's their job, but not to make any determinations for the board. I just thought the way it was worded, though I may be totally wrong, it just sounded that way. So I stand corrected if that is not the way.
No, my understanding is Ducharme and Dillis is, they're advocating for the applicant, but they're responding to questions that have been raised either by the board of butters or the town board. So they're giving their analysis to address concerns raised, but their primary responsibility is acting on behalf of their applicant. That's my understanding.
Okay, great. That answers that. I
Mhm.
just wasn't so sure I heard the whole gist of it. I think that was it. And the last thing was about the variance for the side there, talking about the 41, 42 feet. Did I misunderstand that? Was there not always, are they already not in an allowance situation, or were they in total compliance with no allowances and now they're asking for a bit of allowance on that? I was just worried that that was like a double allowance acting furthermore, or did I misunderstand that?
Chairman, I could answer that if you'd like.
Sure.
We originally, the way the buildings were laid out originally, I believe, and Seth, correct me if I'm wrong, but we did meet the 50-foot front yard setback. However, in addressing other comments raised, including pushing things further away from wetlands, adjusting the driveways, and essentially making other changes to the site to address board and department comments, we did end up moving those buildings slightly so that now we are seeking a waiver. It's not a variance. We are seeking a waiver from that 50-foot requirement, as was discussed, down to 41 and 42.5 feet respectively.
Okay, so I guess the answer is that's not a furtherance, but rather a new allowance for an otherwise totally compliant number. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And so Tom, on just, so these things do crop up as we go through projects on a 40B nature, because as Attorney Ducharme said, they're trying to accommodate boards and town bodies about the infrastructure, where it's located on the site, where it's close to wetlands, where it's close to conservation and land and things like that. So if they shift, sometimes that will create a situation where if it wasn't on the original list of waivers requested, it may crop up. So, so it's just part of, nothing, it's sort of, as we solidify the final package of, then we'll know these are the issues that we have to address, either from the boards or get input from the other commissions on like wetlands or conservation and things like that, and look at the opinions on what we as a board should consider granting, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I really appreciate that. I, as others, are just afraid of the so-called death by 1,000 cuts and making sure it's not one of those creep things. Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So, okay, Erica, any others?
So then there was some back and forth about the stone facade.
Yes.
Donna White, in a butter, had a comment regarding the stone facade. I don't know if she would like to speak to her comment.
I would. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Donna.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Could you just, for the record, identify your full name and address, please?
Donna White, 167 Berlin Road.
Okay, thank you.
So I had a few questions along the way. I guess the stone facade was the first one, but generally about the appearance of this, I heard a comment that said the stone facades were not consistent with a cottage look. I just feel like whatever looks best, whether it's cottage look or not, I think the picture in the original documentation with the stone facade, it looked pretty nice. I feel like, I guess, and I hope this is not offensive, but I feel like a builder is going to know better what a buyer is going to look for, what looks better, what buyers are more likely to want to buy than the board is. And again, I mean no offense by that. I have a stone facade and I like it. What I would definitely not like to see, but it sounds like it's already been decided, is multiple colored houses on top of each other. In a neighborhood, it feels like houses should be different colors, but if the houses are on top of each other, it's just gonna make it stand out more if all these houses are different colors. It's gonna be like that, again, I hope I'm not offending anybody, but the ugly neighborhood across the street from the ice cream place and that ugly low-income neighborhood down on the way to the mall down in Berlin. They look like low-income housing. And obviously it's all personal preference, but that's my opinion on that. The waiver is more concerning to me because I have made a lot of comments in the last few meetings asking about why we had to allow 4 houses on a lot that's not barely big enough for one. And I keep getting the feedback that we can't change the density, we can't change the density, we can't change the density, but we can work on changing the placement. And so then what happened? I asked you to work on changing the placement, and now the placement has gotten worse instead of better. So I officially object to that waiver or whatever it is.
So, and that's fine, it's your right to object to that. As we were speaking with Tom Kashuba, another butter resident, part of the work of a project is, so they're improving certain areas that are, whether it gets it out of the 25-foot buffer zone or away from wetlands or away from conservation lands or whole host of items. When it comes down to the frontage, ultimately, it's oftentimes we want to deal with the frontage because we want it to be a safe sighting from the road so that you're not going to have a safety concern. So So yes, they've now moved the project, two of the homes to alleviate some other concerns. There's a frontage issue. They're certainly within their right to request the waiver. And then as we review it and look at it as far as from safety and whatnot, a lot of times we'll ask the police, fire, people that deal with public safety, is that an issue? I know certainly in town, there are certain homes that certainly whether they were pre-existing non-conforming or they've had other reasons where something's come up and, that gets looked at, whether there's a variance. So that's just part of this process. So you're certainly within your right to object to it, but that's where it's sort of is fallen at the moment. That's what the applicant requested based on the current siting. So.
Gerard, this is Brian. I have a question.
Oh.
I guess one of the questions I have is what with the movement of the two houses, the one being 41 feet and then one being now 42.9, what problem or solution is that solving by moving the houses closer to the road?
If you like, Mr. Chairman, I can address that.
Process, because I know you had altered the plan because of comments. Go ahead.
One thing that we were asked early in the process is to maintain a specific streetscape. So we have them all lined up so that we don't have one building grossly in front of another one. And I feel that the plan layout has accomplished that. The other thing that we're balancing is setbacks between wetlands, and that specifically comes into play for Unit 4. If we were to move it back to meet the required front zoning setback, we would be closer to the wetlands. So we were trying to maximize our distance from the wetlands. Certainly, if the board would support increased units close to the wetlands, we'd be happy to move them back. But like I said, this is just a balancing act between if we go one way, we need one waiver. If we go another way, we need a different waiver. And as Attorney DeShanes mentioned, the nature of the relief is really not severe there. And the thing that's important to point out when you're walking down Farm Road is that it is not a very wide road. So while we're asking for 41 feet to our front setback, there's a substantial distance to the actual edge of pavement. So we are keeping it in line with other residential structures in the area. In fact, if you look across the street from our project, we're much further than the abutter's property is from his front lot line already.
Yeah.
Seth, do you have those figures for the setback from the street?
I can pull those up for you and we can reply in writing to those next time, because I think what you'll find is that we're probably exceeding the 50-foot dimension there.
Okay.
And then one last follow-up to that is so with the current setup of the 41 feet and 42.9, does that not require then a waiver for the back of it being too close to wetlands?
Unit 4 is within the 100-foot buffer zone to wetlands. We are just trying to maximize the distance between the wetlands and the unit itself.
But that's the only one that's within the wetlands?
Correct.
Okay. And what's the distance there? Like if we were to, just so I have an understanding of if we decided that you wanted to move it back, what would that be?
Ballpark, we're probably just under 90 feet from the wetlands, the corner of Unit 4.
Okay. So if we went back, it'd be just under 80.
I'd probably be a little bit closer, and unfortunately, they're at an angle to each other.
Okay. All right.
Can somebody comment on my comments about the color of the house and the stone facade? One more question about the stone facade. There's a maximum of 2, and I can understand you don't want the low-income house to look different. But what if all 4 units wanted stone facade? Would that be considered allowable?
Well, again, I believe for what Joe Pasdola indicated, the affordable housing unit, unless it was done for them at the cost of the developer, they couldn't buy up for that type of modification. Is that correct, Joe?
That's correct.
So, so that's where the 2 and 2, at least, even if they're to market, you wouldn't know necessarily that they're both market unless someone said, oh, they're both the market, but there's still a market that didn't and is affordable that way. So it does go toward the intent of the indistinguishable feature or requirement by the guideline.
So, does, sorry, my phone's ringing, I don't mean to. I want to ask about why we want these houses to all look different, to be different colors. And I understand it in general. I don't understand it when they're all on top of each other. Can somebody comment on that? And can the builder comment on whether they think buyers are going to like that better than if they were all the same?
Mr. Chairman, I could answer that if you'd like.
Sure does. Thank you.
From the applicant's standpoint, we'd prefer to have no restrictions on what colors we offer. Obviously, you know, we'd prefer to let the market dictate what they want. If everybody wanted a beige house, then we would give them beige. If everybody wanted, you know, brown, whatever it is, I mean, the developer would like that flexibility, but it was the design review board that suggested otherwise, that they wanted to dictate how we color coded or how we painted them. And so what they did is they suggested, and we've agreed, that we would have a range of colors. However, once someone selects beige, then that's taken off the list for the next buyers, so that ultimately we would have 4 different colors, although they all have to be within the color range. Again, you know, it really does come down to personal preference here, and we're adhering to what the board imposes based on the recommendations of the design review board. Although I do agree that sometimes when you have 4 structures like this and they are within closer proximity to each other, if they're all painted the same, they all look the exact same design, you start to take on an institutional feel on the overall project, because you have 4 identical structures, where if they're all a little different colors, you know, a little different facade, no facade, maybe some trim things, now you have, you know, some variety in a little neighborhood, as opposed to something that looks like it was, you know, institutional type of design.
Except it's not a neighborhood. They're so on top of each other that it just feels like it's just going to make it that much more obvious that we have 4 houses on top of each other.
So, so Donna, we do rely on input from the design review board. They're you know, they're advocating on behalf of the town of Bolton. So certainly we'll take your comments under advisement, but you can certainly follow up with the design review board with your comments to see if that would, you know, alter their opinion on the coloring of the homes. But for now, that's the current feedback we've received from that outreach to that board.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Eric, any other things percolated?
My apologies. I'm just kind of going through the rest of them now.
Okay.
Tom Kashuba, you had some comments relating to the stop sign and the sugar maple trees. Did you want to bring that up to the board now?
Yeah, I was just talking of the stop sign. There's a lot of issues. I agree with the placement of a stop sign, and I do think it's necessary. However, we're talking about a stop sign that's on Farm Road coming into the T intersection of Berlin. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. Yes, they'd be replacing that yield sign on Farm Road with a stop sign.
Okay. In fact, I travel that so many times, I didn't even notice the yield sign. But okay, that's good because there's also trouble with noise. Although we would like slower traffic on Berlin, unfortunately, putting a stop sign on Berlin would increase the noise because if you can think of the downshifting and restarting of, for instance, trucks, of which we get many too many on Berlin Road, it's a terrible noise when a diesel engine starts back up again. So a stop sign would be nice if it was sort of not at the right place on Berlin Road, but that's another matter. So anyways, that's why I was hoping that they were referring to Farm Road, and that is good because a lot of cars come zipping out of there crazy. And then we have a young woman who's mentally challenged and wanders a lot. And we've got other kids who walk up and down and bicycles that go around that corner because it is a scenic area. That's why we have so many concerns about this project, because it is a scenic area. Anyways, there's a lot of traffic, young people, kids, bicyclists. And as I said, one challenged person who wanders that area because that belongs to the previous property owner. So then if you add into the mix, you're putting trees, I guess, along Berlin and Farm of that corner, that will further block the view of traffic on Berlin Road as you approach it from Farm Road, hence another good reason for that stop sign. So I was just highlighting those facts, issues as I saw them, as one who lives here and traverses that area very often. That was really all I was trying to say there.
Thank you for the feedback.
And so I guess a follow on is that, so those trees would, apart from their beauty, would obstruct some of the view of the northerly direction of Berlin traffic from a position of Farm Road. I believe that, is that a correct statement? As you approach Berlin Road from Farm Road, if there's trees on the left, which I'm all for, and they look beautiful, hence that would obscure observing traffic that's oncoming from the south to the north.
Mr. Chairman, could I add something to that?
Sure, sir.
So we actually have a site distance detail in the plan set, and that shows that there's sufficient stopping distance in all directions from our driveways. And it also prescribes an area that needs to be clear of any obstructions. So there's a hashed area designated on the plan, and we cannot put trees within that area, or we won't be providing for adequate site distances. So that has been addressed and looked into.
Okay. So I guess that's a qualified yes. The trees would obstruct, but it's quite far away because of the hashed area that you're saying to avoid. Okay. Nonetheless, a stop sign is good. I think that's all it was about my point. I don't want to belabor the committee.
At the end of the day, Tom, they're going to want to avoid any safety concern as far as site distances. The police, they want to be sure that the site distances are maintained so that people can travel properly, and if someone else is going to have an issue with it, then you see a car coming because there's a tree or something. So that they're going to, I'm sure, as an applicant, err on the side of safety with regard to those placement of trees.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies my point. I don't want to delay. Thank you.
Yep. Yep.
Mr. Rard, just.
Yep.
Oh, okay. That's nice.
So that's what's in reference that stopping site distance you're trying to show, Erica?
This is what I believe. This is what Seth was referring to. These are the hatched areas here.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay. And where are the trees on that diagram, if at all?
They're not shown on this particular plan. They're shown on the landscaped plan, but generally speaking, and correct me if I'm wrong, Seth, they're in this area here.
That's correct, Erica. And where they approached the hatched area, we made sure that they were placed outside of the hatched area, so there wouldn't be a conflict between those two items.
Okay, then that really points to the fact that a stop sign definitely is needed, because that will block view of southerly traffic from the south traveling north. Okay.
Seth, why we have this plan up, and just so that people can understand, does this plan also depicts the area between the paved road and the legal right of way? Is that not correct?
Correct. That's the item we were discussing first.
Right. So what we were pointing to is the fact that the house that's 41 feet back is measured from the corner of the house to the corner of the right of way. Yet the distance from the corner of the house to the actual paved road is, that much further, as shown by that space between.
It's actually 53 feet, Doug. I had a chance to look at that one.
All right, so, from a visual standpoint, driving down the road, the house will appear to be 53 feet from the paved road, but it's technically only 41 feet from the edge of right-of-way.
What is the right of, what does that mean?
The right-of-way is the full width of the road that the town owns. The pavement sits within the right-of-way. So the right-of-way is always technically wider than the actual paved road itself. So the town owns that, 12 feet between the edge of pavement and the edge of our property line where we're measuring our setback from.
Speaking of that, there was some plantings that were gonna go in. Can you show on here where the plantings are gonna go?
And they're shown on they're shown on the landscape plan, and we're not proposing any plantings within that town right of way.
So which are the plantings gonna be on the property of a particular house?
They are.
This is one lot. So all of our plantings will be within our lot, yes. And here's the plan.
So going forward, it's one lot. Each person doesn't actually own their own lot?
Mr. Chairman, I don't mean to discuss directly with an applicant,
No.
but the answer is no. This is one lot. There's a homeowners association.
So for Donna, for your trouble, oftentimes with the 40Bs, that's what they do. They have, they have different, one basic lot. They basically have a homeowners association. So individual, it's not an individual well, individual septic. It's, they do things as a parcel of one, and they, have the homeowners association deal with so almost like a condominium in some respect for ownership of the land, right, Doug?
Correct.
Yeah. Mhm.
Gerard, do you mind if I just ask a question to Seth, since we're looking at the
Nope.
plan?
No.
Seth, Joe Piznola had made the comment about showing the road right of way. So on the plan, so does this line here represent the edge of pavement then?
That's correct. And then where
Okay.
your cursor just was at the intersection of Berlin Road and Farm Road, the abutter to the north, his private property extends into that area that you're pointing at. And so, so that was the issue that were his property isn't exactly parallel with the edge of pavement. It projects into that intersection.
Into the pavement area?
No, it's very close to where your cursor is, though. Yep, up in that area.
Okay. So I actually did not know that. I for whatever reason thought that was a property line and not a pavement line, which
Erica,
doesn't
could I
make
ask
any
you
sense.
to let Bob Pace back into the meeting? He got disconnected.
Oh, I thought I did. Okay, let me.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh no,
No,
not at
I
all.
just got back in. I'm sorry. My internet went down for about 10 minutes. I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
it's Martha Remington.
hello Martha, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I had two comments. One is a private citizen. I've been at this
Martha,
intersection,
could you, for the record, just identify your address?
Main Street, 447.
Thank you.
I travel this intersection quite a bit, and the worst part is cars coming north on Berlin Road are hidden until they come over a little knoll. And I just, otherwise it's pretty clear. You can see
Mhm.
Randall Road, you can see, you know, town side of Berlin Road. And now I also, go ahead.
No, you're speaking.
Yeah, and the other comment I had is, as chairman of the Historical Commission, this is a very historic area across on this diagram here, the poorhouse, a huge 18th century house where people who couldn't afford, you know, to keep their own themselves, they would stay there and they would work on the farm. And it used to be called Poor Farm Road. Then it was called Town Farm Road, and now it's Farm Road. So I just wanted to say, I think it's kind of a rural area. It has a lot of history, even though it's fallen behind the times as far as popularity. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. So if we don't have any other comments, Erica, we did, well, please confirm that first. And then I was gonna say, we did get a letter from Tom Kashuba where he had a host of concerns. I think some may have been based on earlier in the hearing process because there wasn't always, you know, when we kicked off the hearing, you know, we were trying to get an understanding of what the applicant's plan is and the peer reviews. So there was a little less time for public comment. The second hearing, we started with I think it was like a half hour of public comment, but we did do a letter. And I think some of the comments have been raised tonight, but if Tom wants to take the time to, in a synopsis of major concerns there, if they've already been addressed, at least, or vocalized, then we can skip over those. But if there's some that he thinks we need to put in front of us at the moment, then let's give him the opportunity to do so.
The only chat comment I see at present that hasn't really been addressed at this point is Tom Kashuba was asking the location of the stop sign. And I believe, Seth, perhaps you could chime in. It's not shown, but it's in this location here somewhere.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct. We will, when we show that opposite property line, we'll show the existing yield sign, and it would be our intent to replace the existing yield sign with a stop sign.
So that's only going in one direction?
Correct.
That stop sign, okay.
Mhm.
But traffic moving in the other direction, coming up Berlin Road and then turning right on Farm Road, that would be, they would just keep moving?
The only stop sign proposed would be for traffic that's entering Berlin Road.
Okay, thank you.
So in reference to the previous comment from the board, did you want me to blast through my letter there, not to take up too much time here? Or?
Well, if all the other comments, you know, that have percolated tonight from, you know,
Yeah,
the
sure.
discussions, you know, I want to be sure we address those, but you did take some time to put together some observations and comments. So, and you inferred in there that, you know, there may be some short shrift on the public comment side of it, and I certainly don't ascribe to that. I mean, it is a public hearing, so I certainly want to ensure that the public comment is heard. So if there's items that have already been addressed, certainly feel free to gloss, to, you know, skip over those because we don't need to rehash, but
Absolutely.
if there are others that But, you may find out that some of the comments you have with regard to, inference, like when we're talking about the site development, blasting, well, that's not gonna be an issue.
Exactly.
Anticipate for it. But if there are other items that you wanna, just put out there so that we know,
Yeah,
a lot of my,
Yeah, sure. I got my list on the screen, and you're correct. You've answered quite a few. In fact, the very first item was that we collectively feel very strongly that we've been given short thrift, but on this meeting, we have more opportunity, and that works very well to that, and I hope that keeps up. So that's done. The COVID
so that's
thing,
just to that comment, Tom.
yes,
As we indicate even in an early hearing, the beginning of the process, we need to, as a board, hear the facts that are of the application, right? What they're really trying to do, and it's dominated by the applicant and our peer reviewers. We do try to sprinkle in the public comment, but there is a lot of information that we need to first receive before we can technically, we have to have an understanding as well as the town. But as we sort of get finalized on plans and comments from our peer reviewers and whatnot, there does open up more time for abutters to, and you've also seen now where it's sort of settling as far as from the applicant's perspective. This is the project that they may have proposed something to start, but now it's shifting in areas and you get a new look. So now you have more opportunity to comment on, what potentially could be the actual project that we look at from here till the
understood.
process.
Understood. So one of the other points was the COVID pandemic puts a lot of impact on everything, including the ability for people to comment and give time and visit and so forth. So I was just making the comment that I hope that we're not given short thrift on that either. It's going to alter everything, and including the personnel who are working on the site, because this pandemic is clearly going to last 6 to 12 months. No vaccine is in sight till next quarter Q1 or Q2 of next year. Anyway, so that's a big concern to us. I'm not 18 and I have other issues, and I really rather not die. I want to live a bit longer. Then I had communications and disruption. Another thing, because of COVID, we are all working from home essentially, 90% of the people, and so it's no longer a part-time, do some homework from home and get to work. It's like we are working 24/7 from home. And because of that, I was worried about the cutover. If they're going to be putting up power lines there to power these houses, I imagine it's going to be a hot cutover at some point. So I'm just ensuring that we work with the public utility to make sure that that is done off hours. So you can't have like a conference call with a board meeting and then be cut off, or a meeting like this, for example. So I want to be sure that timing is in there. Also emergency radio communications and so forth. That's why I mentioned blasting and the equipment and so forth, because I happen to operate an emergency communications radio site for my house. That's the blah, 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 blah. So that's the point, just to make clear. And noise and vibration. People may not know it, but I live right on that, as Martha brought up, the Poor Farm area. So I'm right above the features of that area. And sound, you may or may not know, travels upwards at about a 30-degree angle. So I and the other abutters, and even others on multiple directions of the compass, really hear noise from that intersection greatly. Especially diesel engines and so forth. You end up with a rumbling that goes through the feet, vibrates your floor, walls, and windows. So try working under those conditions during the day is very difficult. So that's a major concern for me. Moving really fast, radio frequency interference, mentioned that. Safety and traffic, we covered that pretty well. Property values and taxes, I've raised that before, but I haven't really heard much on it. It's formulaic, it's codified, that our house values will go down slightly, if not.
That's untrue.
Is that untrue?
That is untrue.
But it's based on the average cost of surrounding homes. So how can it not affect it? It's a formula. It's a mathematical formula.
You're going to have 3 market rate homes, new market rate homes in the area. It's probably benefiting. I mean, it's just what I look at. It's probably going to benefit an area. It's going to improve some of the structures in that area. So, yeah, the market will tell us. If there's gonna
But
be
as
market
Martha
decline.
pointed
I was-
Yeah, but as Martha pointed out, we're actually destroying a value to the area. We're not adding to it. We're destroying some of the value because that is a wetlands open feed area, animal, so forth. So that's going to have a downward effect, not upwards.
I really strongly disagree with that, the comment that we're adding value. We've got a beautiful meadow there and we're adding 4 houses on top of each other. There is no value add here.
Yeah, exactly. And it can only go down. I mean, I would be surprised if it stayed the same, but it could only go down, not up. Anyways, and there's been no mention to the town on this. Will adjustments be made? I guess it'll just be in the formulas. As long as our taxes go down, that's good. I know the town wants money, but that's the reality. Penalties, are there any penalties for lack of compliance? I haven't heard this mentioned in anything. Maybe I missed the documentation. I haven't read every single page of everything.
Well, we haven't got into like the final, when you deal with the construction plan and whatnot, whether there's a bond that would be required such that if things happen, it would drop the bond. So we're early on in the project, and at some point they'll nail down construction timeline, construction milestones, things like that. So if that is an area that we have to address, then we address it. But
okay, and I'm
still early in the project.
Home stretch, impact on wildlife. Perhaps people don't know, but that is a gateway between the Old Bay, Lovers Leap, whatever you want to call that stretch of conservation area, and the conservation area that is the Coolidge property, the 2 farms, North and South Farm Road. That is basically a travel point where you see deer go by, you see all kinds of wildlife, and it's also a feeding area for barn hawks, owls. You can see them flying all over. So this will be a massive disruption to that. I hope everybody realizes that. I don't think anything can be done, but it just needs some type of awareness. Lastly, detailed project timing. Where are we with, what is the estimated project timing should this be approved? Like, when does it start? When would it end? And then we got the hours of operation and so forth. Is there any idea on that?
I mean, we'd have to go through the approval process, and then assuming it was, if it were approved with conditions, then there's an appeal period. Someone could, the butter could appeal it. The applicant could appeal our decision. It goes to, there's an appeals process. I think it's still early to actually put a target time to say September of 2020 is where the approval and they start construction. I don't have that in my mind, but the applicant may have an idea of where their goal would love to get to. So maybe Doug Duchesne would like to comment.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer that. Immediately, once a decision is issued, you are correct. There is an appeals period, which appeals could be taken, in which case things would be pushed off for quite some time. Assuming no appeals, we then need to go back to the state for what's considered final approval. What the state will do is compare a comprehensive permit that was issued against the original site approval application. The state wants to make sure that the ultimate approved project is consistent with what we originally proposed. Of course, the state looks to allow any changes that the town required or made, but there is a final approval that we have to go back to the state. That can take anywhere from 30 to 90 days. And it isn't until we get final approval that we're then entitled to seek a building permit and to start construction. And I will say that in terms of penalty structure for noncompliance, the times of operation, all of the details concerning the construction, to the extent that this board doesn't impose any additional restrictions, we have to adhere to the town's regulations pursuant to the building permit. So if we do something out of line, we don't comply, the building inspector can cease and desist. He can require things be torn down. I mean, we're going to be subject to the same protections and restrictions that all other developments in town are held accountable to. With respect to non-compliance of the comprehensive permit, if we don't comply with the comprehensive permit, the building inspector again would have the right to issue a cease and desist and stop the project in its tracks. So there is in fact a penalty structure and a compliance structure built into this whole process, and it's what your town has under its building permit requirements.
Okay, thank you for that. So I guess wide range, 4 to 12 months, you know, just.
That is, Tom, a reasonable estimate, knowing what we
Big
all
window.
what we all know today.
Okay, now, once we're in that window, if you should get approval and if you start, will you be making, that was part of my point, will you be making compensations of normal work schedules for the fact that people are working from home around you during the process? Can, you know, it's.
No, we will adhere to the town's noise ordinances and all of the other ordinances that apply to building. And those were intended to protect people from undue noise and whatnot. But no, we're not, we're gonna have to follow what the building inspector dictates in his building permit.
Because the reality is any equipment will be affecting things, so you can't get around that.
It'll be stated in the permit, in the conditions, like the hours of operation. So those are embedded in the comprehensive permit at some point. So it may not be stated presently, but in the decision that ultimately gets drafted, you know, those types of,
Okay.
you know, there'll be a plan, there'll be all these items, and, you know, timing will be in there. So.
Okay, because that's excellent, because I'm just asking that be considered, because we are in COVID and we are working from home and we are on conference calls like this one. And if we were talking right now and a truck went by on Berlin, you'd hear it. Anyway, so I'm glad you're going to consider that.
It's a different world than COVID. We're all dealing with it, so, you know, it's
Yeah,
going to potentially impact some things, but.
Excellent, as long as we take it into consideration. Excellent. Last point now, I'll stop boring you here.
You're not boring us, you just.
I came up, I was just wondering, are the builders in possession of the property now, or is this a conditional situation?
We have a site control documentation that we had to prove to the state.
That means you own the property officially, or it's conditional upon approval?
We own the property.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. Thank you. Okay, I think that's the gist of my points. There's a lot more detail in there if anybody is bored enough to read my document. That's it. I thank you for giving me that time.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, so Erica, has anything else percolated, or we could look at what's next?
Yep, I do not see any further comments. Let me just check to make sure no one else has their hand raised. No. Do you mind if I just add a question or comment related to the timeline?
Nope.
I didn't know if Doug also, I didn't catch it. Did he speak to the filing to Conservation Commission and Board of Health as well in terms of the timeline?
Sure, I can. Mr. Chairman, we cannot, we're not in a position to apply to conservation without having an understanding of whether we have the waivers that we've requested or not. Our application makes no sense without them. Same with the Board of Health. We are prepared to file with both of those boards. immediately following your decision with respect to the waivers, which, by the way, we are hoping to address sooner than later. And yeah, it's been my experience typically that the zoning board, in making its decision on the waivers and on the permit, puts a condition that we will be required to file with the Board of Health and the Conservation Commission, which we have to anyway. So, you know, but that's generally the way I see it handled. Perhaps Mr. Pesnoa has a different opinion or will substantiate my opinion, but that's where we are. We can't file with those two until we have our waivers.
Mr. Chairman, that's essentially the way that these type of projects work. And the main reason for that is the regulations only require preliminary plans, and many times additional detail is required to support applications to conservation commissions and boards of health. And as Attorney DeShane said, you know, it's certainly easier for the commission and the Board of Health to understand what's being put before them if they understand the ZBA's ultimate position on the waivers from their particular local bylaws.
So on that topic of discussing the waivers, I think we could, when we have the final waivers, Erica, if you could get those out to the different boards, just wetlands, and I think that, the different groups, and see if they have any feedback first. But then we could maybe start the process of reviewing those at the next hearing. And then if we can get the feedback from the Horsley Whitton, that they can confirm that everything has been addressed as far as the technical analysis with the current plans, we could tick off some of those items that we could then say, okay, the project is at least at a static point, to the point it's static, because it still could shift or things could still come up, but at least we have the understanding that they will vet the technical process. Are you muted, Erica, or can you hear? No.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I didn't
Oh,
realize
okay.
you were asking a response from me, but no, certainly I can do that. I can make sure that I seek department comments relating to the final waiver list and make sure that we have a response from Horsley Whitton for the next meeting. That's no problem.
Okay, perfect. So, so with that, can you look at the calendar and propose can you look at an availability to continue the hearing to?
We can certainly do that.
And given that it'll probably be into August, does any of the board members have any out of office, out of remote area in August, so that we don't want to schedule something in a particular week?
Nope, I'll be here.
Where at Zoom, I think I'll be available at, most generally any time. I don't have any commitments at the moment.
We already have something on August 10th.
Is that Still River?
That's correct.
Yeah, no, that'll be fun. So how about to the extent we can get comments from the boards, maybe that following week if people are available.
The week of the 17th. Yeah, I'm pretty open.
Yeah. What was that?
Gerard,
Yep.
excuse me. Gerard, I believe the Board of Selectmen is meeting on the 20th of August. I believe that's their next meeting. So in case they need to deliberate in a meeting, And I'm not saying that they will, I don't know at this point. Do you think it would make more sense to possibly meet on the 24th or the 25th?
That's fine with me. I mean, I said 24th be good. What's the 24th?
It's a Monday.
Ooh,
Monday.
is there a Tuesday available?
25th?
25th is a Tuesday.
Yep.
And that would make it about an even month from now.
Is people available on the 25th at 6 p.m.? It seems like a good start point.
Yep.
That works for me.
Okay.
That'll also be public, so if that's true, it works for me. too.
They'll all
What
be
was the
public.
date? I'm sorry.
August 25th.
August
Yeah.
25th at 6.
That works.
Okay. Mr.
So-
Andy? That work for your calendar? Okay, you know, this is muted. Erica, is Andy on mute?
Yes, it works.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Andy. Appreciate it. I just don't want to, work toward a motion to continue and then have it backfire at the end if someone is not available. Okay, do we have a motion to continue to August 25th at 6 p.m.?
I make a motion
Oh, go
that
ahead.
we continue this hearing until August 25th at 6 p.m.
Second.
Thank
Second.
you. Okay. Do a roll call vote, Erica?
Yes, please. Gerard Ahern,
In favor?
Bradley Reed,
Yes.
Andy Kishitz,
Yes.
Brian Holmes,
Yes.
and Kay Stoner.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll continue the hearing on August 25th at 6 p.m. and Erica will get the waivers out to the boards and we'll solicit from Horsley Whitton. And then if anyone else has comments or things for the board to consider, well, for us to get in front of the applicant, sooner than later in the process so that the applicant has time to turn it around to us. And it's always nice if we can look at things prior to the meeting versus the same day of the meeting. So we'll look forward to seeing people on August 25th.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you. Good night.
All right.
Yep. And for the board, we have another item for just minutes review. So I think you can drop the rest, right, Erica?